My name is Walter Acklin. I'm 71 years old, and last November, my daughter told a room full of my family that I was losing my mind. $60,000 had gone missing from my savings account. When I drove over and asked her where it went, she tilted her head, lowered her voice, and said, "Dad, you're confused again." Everybody at that table nodded. My own brother nodded. And here's the part I'm not proud of. I believed her for 4 days. 4 days I sat in my kitchen wondering if my wife's life insurance money had ever existed at all. Then I opened the coffee tin in the cabinet above the stove. 3 weeks later, the bank manager called the two of us into a glass conference room. My daughter walked in smiling. Before we go any further, take a second to like and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read them. Now let me take you back to March of last year. The day I forgot my doctor's name for exactly 10 minutes. The room smelled like hand sanitizer and old carpet. I was sitting on the paper-covered table, shirt off, 41 years of union work showing in my shoulders. The nurse asked who my cardiologist was. I opened my mouth. Nothing came. I knew her. Small woman, gray streak in her hair, kept a picture of a sailboat on the wall. I'd been seeing her for 6 years. I could see the sailboat. I could not find the name. "It's fine," the nurse said. "Take your time." 10 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. 10 minutes of grabbing at a word that wasn't there. Then it came back. "Vance," I said. "Dr. Priya Vance." Dana was in the chair by the door. My daughter, 38 years old, purse in her lap. She had her phone out. Her thumbs were moving. I asked what she was doing. "Just taking notes for the doctor," she said. Dr. Vance came in 20 minutes later and used a word I'd never heard. Transient ischemic attack. A TIA. Blood flow interrupted, then restored. Not a stroke, not dementia. "This is a warning, not a diagnosis," she said. "Watch your blood pressure. Come back in 3 months." I felt like a man who tripped on a curb and found out the curb was a cliff edge. In the truck, Dana didn't start the engine right away. She sat with her hands on the wheel. "Dad," she said, "I think we should start planning ahead, just in case." I said we'd see. "I'm not saying anything's wrong," she said. "I'm saying let's be smart." She pulled out of the lot, and I didn't ask her one single question about what she'd been typing. I still make 2 cups of coffee. Ruth's been gone 2 years. Cancer took 11 months to do it, and I was there for every hour. I know how to be alone. I just haven't taught my hands. Every morning I pour the second cup, and every morning I drink it cold around noon, standing at the sink, looking at the bird feeder she hung crooked in 2009. Above the stove there's a Folgers can, dented on one side. Ruth used to keep coupons in it. She'd clip them Sunday mornings and never use half. After she died, I emptied it out and started keeping my papers in there. Bank statements mostly, warranty cards, the receipt for her headstone. Here's the thing about me. For 41 years I ran wire through people's walls, and I never once got paid without a piece of paper on both ends. That habit doesn't leave a man. So on the first Saturday of every month, I drive 4 miles to the Third Fork Savings Branch, walk to the ATM, and print my statement. Paper. Not the phone. Paper. Then I bring it home, sit at the kitchen table, and go down the column with a pencil, checking each line against my calendar. Ruth used to laugh at me. "Walt," she'd say, "you're the only man I know who files a receipt for a candy bar." I told her the candy bar receipt would be the one we needed someday. In that account sat $60,000. 22 of it was mine, put away 100 at a time across 4 decades. The other 38 was Ruth's life insurance. I never touched it. I called it my never be a burden money. 3 weeks after that appointment, Dana invited me to Sunday dinner. Dana sets a nice table. Cloth napkins, the good plates, a candle nobody needs. Her husband, Ryan, carved the roast. My granddaughter Josie sat across from me, 16 and quiet, pushing green beans around. My brother Cal came too, 68 and still wearing his hat indoors like our father did. We got through dinner fine. Then Dana put her hand over mine. "Dad, I want to talk about something." I said, "All right." "What happens if you go back in the hospital?" I said I'd probably complain a lot. She didn't laugh. I mean it. If you're admitted, I can't move $1 for you. Not for the ambulance, not for anything. I'd have to sit in a waiting room and watch bills pile up. Ryan set down the carving knife. It's just paperwork, Walt. Cal nodded into his plate. She's got a point, brother. I looked around the table. 4 faces, all of them, patient with me. That's the part I remember, the patience. I said I'd think about it. Dana squeezed my hand. Of course, there's no rush. Then she reached into her purse and set a folded paper by my water glass. A bank form, joint account application, already filled out in her handwriting. My name on the top line. I just picked it up so you wouldn't have to, she said. Josie looked at the paper, then at me. She didn't say anything. Bank closes at 4 on Tuesday, Dana said, if you decide. I drove home with that form on the passenger seat. Stopped at the light on Winter Street and sat through a full green because I was reading it. I want to be honest with you. Nothing in me screamed. Nothing warned me. I'd made up my mind before I got to my driveway. Third Fork Savings has a lobby with a low ceiling and a coffee station nobody's cleaned since 2011. The branch manager took us herself, Marlene Hoyt. 50s reading glasses on a chain, the kind of woman who says exactly as many words as the job requires. She read the form, then she looked at me over the glasses. Mr. Acklin, I want to make sure you understand the structure. This is a joint account with right of survivorship. I said I understood. That means Ms. Acklin Boyd becomes a full owner, not an agent, not a helper, an owner. She can withdraw any amount anytime without your permission or knowledge. Dana said, that's the whole point, so I can help him. Marlene didn't look at Dana. She kept her eyes on me. Mr. Acklin, I need to hear it from you. The room got quiet. A printer ran somewhere behind the teller line. I said yes. She slid the signature card over. I took my pencil out of my shirt pocket, then put it back and used her pen, signed it. $60,000 changed hands in about 4 seconds, and nobody in the building noticed but the 4 of us. Dana was already talking on the way to the door. Now you don't have to drive out here every month. I'll pull it up online and text you the balance. I said I'd keep printing mine. She stopped walking, just for a second. Her face did something small and quick. Dad, that's silly. It's the same information. I said it was, and I'd still be printing it. She laughed and said, suit yourself, and we went out into the parking lot. I've replayed that half second 100 times since, that little flicker. It was the first true thing I saw. For a while, my daughter was wonderful. April, she came by twice a week, brought a casserole dish, took my laundry, fixed the kitchen faucet that had been dripping since Ruth was alive. She sat on my porch and asked about my mother. May, she took me to a matinee. I don't like movies. I went anyway. I felt like a suspicious old fool. I'd had that flicker in my head for weeks, and here was my only child showing up, doing the things. I decided I'd misread her. Grief does that. You start seeing angles and flat surfaces. First Saturday of April, I printed my statement. Nothing unusual. Filed it in the can. First Saturday of May, I printed it. One withdrawal, $3,000. I asked her about it on the phone that night, keeping it light. Oh, homeowner's insurance, she said. I prepaid the year so you'd have one less bill. You're welcome, by the way. I thanked her, genuinely. Then Monday I was cleaning out the desk and found the policy renewal notice from the insurance company. $1,180, annual premium. I sat there with the notice in one hand. $1,180. She'd taken $3,000, $1,820 unaccounted for. I picked up the phone twice and put it down twice, because I could hear how it would sound. An old man calling his daughter to interrogate her over a bill she'd paid out of kindness. Then that Thursday I pulled out of my own driveway and could not remember the name of my street. 30 seconds. Cold blank 30 seconds. Rockwell Avenue. 46 years at that address. I got home and I did not look at the insurance notice again. I decided I'd remembered the number wrong. A man who doubts his own mind starts running drills. I did multiplication tables in the shower. I named every customer I'd wired for in 1994. The Hollisters, the dentist on Bell Road, the Methodist church basement. I could do it. All of it. But you can't prove a thing like that to yourself. Every time I passed the test, I thought that's exactly what a man losing it would think. So in June, I went back to Dr. Vance and asked her straight out if I was going down. She had me do a test. 30 questions, pencil and paper, draw a clock, repeat 5 words, count backwards by sevens. 27 out of 30. That's normal, Mr. Acklin, she said. That's a good score for a man of 40. I asked what the TIA meant then. It meant a vessel narrowed for a few minutes. It doesn't mean your mind is leaving. She wrote something. You are not developing dementia. Somebody would have to work very hard to convince a court otherwise. I laughed. She didn't. I put those papers in the coffee can and I told nobody. Not Cal, not Dana. I want you to understand why, because it's the part that shames me most. If I'd walked into Sunday dinner waving a test score, I'd have looked like a man defending himself. And a man defending himself looks guilty of the thing. So I stayed quiet. Meanwhile, Dana had started talking about me in the third person while I was in the room. He gets tired in the afternoons. He's better in the mornings, aren't you, Dad? He doesn't really follow all that anymore. I didn't argue. I just started writing down what she said with the date on the back of the statements. Josie came over in July to do a summer history assignment. She likes my kitchen table because it's big and nobody talks to her. She was stuck on the Pacific War. I told her about my uncle. 1942, the USS Wasp, Captain Forrest Sherman, sunk by a Japanese submarine off Guadalcanal in September. My uncle came off her burning and lived to be 88. She wrote it all down. Then she stopped writing. Grandpa? I said, what? Why does Mom keep saying you forget stuff? I want to tell you I had an answer. I sat there, holding a pencil, like a fool. She kept going. Because you just gave me a ship, a captain, a year and a month. I had to look up how to spell Guadalcanal. I said your mother worries. Josie made a face I recognized. It was Ruth's face, the one that meant she was deciding whether to be polite. They fight at night, she said, about money, every night for like a month. I asked her what about money. I don't know. Dad says stuff like, it's the only way, and Mom cries. She shrugged, 16 years old and pretending it was nothing. And there's a word they keep saying, petition, like a petition. I said I didn't know. Whatever, she went back to her paper. It's probably a work thing. She left at 6. I stood in the driveway and watched her taillights go down Rockwell. Petition. I turned the word over all evening like a screw I'd found on the floor, something that came off of something and I didn't know what yet. I wish to God I'd looked it up that night. Instead, I waited 3 more weeks until the first Saturday in August and drove out to print my statement. The ATM at Third Fort prints on cheap paper with a serrated edge, 1 page normally, sometimes half a page. That morning it kept going, 2 pages, 3, 4. I stood there in the heat with the machine chewing and I felt something in my chest that had nothing to do with my heart. Balance $31,411. I read it 3 times. I even took my glasses off and cleaned them on my shirt, which is a thing a man does when he wants a different answer. Then I went down the column. June 9th, transfer out, 8,000. July 19th, transfer out, 12,000. August 2nd. Withdrawal, 6,500, August 9th. Withdrawal, 2,000. Plus the 3,000 in May, plus smaller ones I hadn't caught, 400 here, 1,100 there. $28,589 gone since spring. Ruth's insurance money. The money I'd promised her nobody would ever have to argue about. I got in my truck and I sat there. Rain started, the fat summer kind that comes down all at once. The windshield went white. I didn't cry. I want to be honest with you about that because people expect the crying. I didn't. I took the pencil out of my shirt pocket and I started underlining. Line by line, date by date. The way I've read a job invoice 10,000 times in my life. 40 minutes I sat in that parking lot. Then I folded the pages into my pocket and drove straight to my daughter's house. I shouldn't have done that. Any lawyer would tell you so. But understand, at that moment, standing on her porch with rain in my collar, I still thought this was a misunderstanding. Dana opened the door in an apron, flour on her hands. Dad, you're soaked. I walked past her to the kitchen and put the 4 pages on the counter next to the flour. I need you to look at this. She didn't look at it. That's the detail I need you to hold on to. There were 4 pages of her own bank account sitting 18 inches from her hand, and my daughter never once dropped her eyes to them. She looked at me instead. Then her head tilted just slightly and her voice went down into that soft register. Dad, you're confused again. I said I wasn't. We talked about this, remember? In June, we sat right here and went through all of it. She reached out and touched my sleeve. You're wet. Let me get you a towel. I asked her where the money was. Ryan came in from the garage wiping his hands and read the room in about 2 seconds. He folded his arms and leaned in the doorway. Walt, you signed the papers. I said I knew what I signed. Then you know it's a joint account. Legally, that's her money too. She doesn't need a permission slip. I asked again where it was. Dana said it's being managed. 3 words. Being managed. Like the money was a condition. I stood in my daughter's kitchen, dripping on her floor, and I understood something I hadn't understood on the drive over. She wasn't denying the withdrawals. She hadn't argued about a single number. She hadn't even looked at one. She was denying me. My memory, my judgment, the reliability of the man in front of her. Then she picked up her phone, and while I was still standing there, she called my brother. She put it on speaker. That was deliberate. She set the phone on the counter, screen upright on top of my statements. Uncle Cal, hey, sorry to bother you. Cal's voice came out tinny. What's going on, hun? Dad drove over here by himself again, in the rain. He's upset about the money thing. The money thing. Oh, Walt. Cal's voice changed, softer, slower, the voice you use with a child. Buddy, you okay? I leaned toward the phone and told him $28,000 was missing, and I had the pages in my hand. A pause on the line, then, Dana's taking care of all that, brother. That's what the account's for, remember? Remember. He used the same word she did, same word, same place in the sentence. I looked at my daughter. She was watching me with an expression I can only call sympathetic. Warm, even. She was so sorry this was happening to me. And I finally understood what I was standing in. This conversation had already happened, many times, over months, on calls I wasn't on, at tables I wasn't at. My family had been assembled one at a time into an audience for a story about me. The story was so finished by August that when the subject of it showed up holding evidence, nobody heard evidence. They heard a symptom. Ryan said, "Let me drive you home, Walt." I said no thank you. I picked my pages up off the counter, had to lift her phone to do it, and told Cal I'd see him Sunday. I didn't slam the door. I want that on the record. I closed it like a man closing a door. Then I drove home and got out the coffee can. I put the can on the table and pried the lid with a butter knife. Inside, every statement I'd printed since the day I signed that form. April, May, June, July, August. Paperclip by month the way I've clipped invoices my whole life. 5 months of the account she'd been quietly emptying. Printed by the man she'd told everyone couldn't remember his own street. I laid them out, end to end. Then I took Ruth's calendar off the wall, the free one from Corbin Building Supply, hanging on the same nail since 2016, and set it beside them. Every appointment I've ever had is on that calendar, in pencil. Time, place, purpose. Ruth started that habit, and I never stopped it. I went line by line. June 9th, 8,000 out. Calendar square empty. Nothing there for me. July 19th, $12,000. Time stamped on the statement. 2:14 p.m. Branch listed, Columbus Road. I looked at July 19th on the calendar. My handwriting. Riverside Cardiac Cath arrive 1:30. Riverside Hospital is in Columbus, 91 miles from that branch. On July 19th at 2:14 in the afternoon, I was flat on a table with a catheter in my femoral artery and a nurse holding my wrist. I could not have been at that bank, not by car, not by prayer, not by any story anybody could tell. I sat back in Ruth's chair. For 4 days, I had genuinely wondered whether I'd taken that money myself and forgotten. That's what 4 months of being handled does to a man. I had started building a case against myself, and the answer had been sitting in a coffee can above my stove the whole time, printed in cheap ATM ink. I circled July 19th in pencil. Then I found 4 more days exactly like it. Monday morning, I drove to the town library and asked the woman at the desk for help. I told her I needed to know what petition meant when it involved an elderly parent. She didn't blink. She turned her monitor toward me and typed 2 words. Guardianship petition. I read for an hour and a half at a table meant for children. Here's what I learned, and I'd ask you to sit with it the way I had to. A guardianship is a court order declaring a person incapacitated. Not sick, not slowing down, incapacitated. A judge assigns another adult to make your decisions, where you live, which doctor you see, whether you drive, whether you sign anything ever again. To get one, you file a petition. You supply statements from people who know the person, family usually, statements about incidents, confusion, forgetfulness, dates. I stopped reading and looked at the ceiling of that library for a long minute. March, exam room, my daughter in the chair by the door with her thumbs moving, just taking notes for the doctor. Those were not notes for a doctor. No doctor ever asked her for them. Those were the first entry in a file written down 10 minutes after her father lost a name, the only 10 minutes in 71 years I have ever lost anything. She hadn't stolen my money. My money was the small part. She was building a case that I was not a man anymore. The money was just what she could carry out while the case was being built. I thanked the librarian. She asked if I was all right. I asked her one more thing, where the county probate court was and what time it opened. The probate clerk's counter is on the 2nd floor, past a vending machine that takes your dollar and thinks about it. I told the young man behind the glass I wanted to know if a guardianship had been filed. He asked whose. Mine. He looked up. To his credit, he didn't make a face. These are public records, sir. Spell the last name. Acklin, he typed. The printer behind him started up, and I watched a page come out of it upside down. He read it through the glass. Filed September 2nd in the matter of Walter J. Acklin, alleged incompetent. Alleged incompetent, that's the language. That's what I am on a document in my own county building. Petitioner, Dana Acklin Boyd, daughter. Counsel, a firm out of Columbus. 3 names on the letterhead. Hearing date, December 14th. I asked him why I'd never received anything. He checked. Service address on file is, and he read out her address on Fairmount. It says here you reside with the petitioner. I said I didn't. I said I've lived at 118 Rockwell Avenue since 1979, and my wife planted the hedge out front. He said quietly that he could only tell me what was filed. I asked for a copy. He charged me $2.25. I want you to follow the arithmetic I did going down those stairs. It was the 4th of October. The hearing was December 14th. 10 weeks. In 10 weeks, a judge who had never met me would be handed sworn statements from my daughter, my son-in-law, and God knows who else, saying Walter Acklin could not be trusted with his own affairs. And I had 10 weeks, a coffee can, and a pencil. I sat in that courthouse lot a long while before I turned the key. 71 years old and a stranger behind a window had just told me my daughter wanted a judge to decide when I could buy groceries. If somebody's ever rewritten your story to your own family, I'd like to hear about it in the comments. I mean that. And if you want to see what a retired electrician with a coffee can did to a Columbus law firm, hit subscribe now. It gets better than you'd think. So, 10 weeks. I thought about the police first. Everybody does. I got as far as the number on the refrigerator. Then I pictured it. A deputy in my kitchen, 28 years old, holding 4 pages of ATM paper, while a 71-year-old man with a documented brain event explains that his daughter is taking his money. And Dana on the phone from Fairmount Street, calm as still water. Officer, he had a TIA in March. There's a competency hearing in December. I can send you the filing. That deputy leaves. Now there's a report. The report says an elderly man made accusations against his caregiver. And that report walks into court in December with a ribbon on it. A lawyer, then. I called one. Retainer, $4,000. I had $410 in checking. The rest of my money sat in an account my daughter co-owned. You see the design of the thing. It's tidy. So I sat at Ruth's table 2 nights and thought about where in this world a piece of paper still outweighs a sad story told well. Not a police station. Not a family dinner. Not a courtroom, not yet. A bank. At a bank, the paper is the truth. Timestamps, branch codes. Nobody at a bank cares how sincere you sound. Wednesday morning, I called Third Fork Savings and asked for an appointment with Marlene Hoyt. The woman on the phone said, "Certainly." "Then would you like your co-owner present, sir?" I held that phone a while. "Yes," I said. "Please invite her." I hung up with my hand still on the receiver. Because if I did this behind my daughter's back, I would be exactly the man she'd been describing. Confused, sneaky, working in the dark. I wasn't going to hand her that. She could sit at the table and watch. 14 people at Dana's for Thanksgiving. Cousins, Ryan's mother, and neighbor with nowhere else to go. They put me at the end by the kitchen door. "So you can get up easier, Dad." I've been getting up easier than her since the day she was born. Then she cut my turkey, reached across with her own knife and fork and cut my meat into pieces without asking, in front of 14 people, and went back to her wine like it was nothing. Nobody said a word. That's how good she'd gotten. Cutting a grown man's food had become normal at that table. Ryan's mother asked me about the old jobs. She'd heard I wired the town hall. I said I did. Dana said, "He mixes those up now," smiling at her, already changing the subject, so I said it. 1987, town hall, 3 stories, 180 amps at the main. Fault was in panel B, second floor. Scorched neutral behind the clerk's office. Took 9 days because the county wouldn't pay overtime. I said it the way a man says his own phone number. The table went quiet. 14 people, and for about 3 seconds, nobody moved. Josie was looking at her mother. Then a cousin laughed and said, "Well, there you go." And Ryan's mother said her own memory was worse, and everybody picked their forks back up. Whole thing gone in 6 seconds. That's what I learned that day. A story about you doesn't get corrected by facts. People don't want the trouble of it. Later, out in the hall by the coats, Ryan said something to Cal. He wasn't quiet about it. "We're handling it. December." Cal nodded. Cal knew. And my brother did not look at me once for the rest of that meal. I waited by his truck, cold enough to see her breath. He came out at 9:30 with a plate of leftovers, saw me, and stopped walking for half a second. I asked what he signed. He set the plate on the hood. "Walt." I asked again. "It's an affidavit, just a statement." He shrugged inside his coat. "Says you seem increasingly forgetful." Increasingly forgetful. He said it like a man reading a phrase somebody handed him, which is what it was. I asked when. August. I asked what he'd actually seen. What thing on what day had he personally watched me forget? He didn't have one. He reached for a couple and came back empty. He'd seen me quiet at a barbecue in June. He'd heard about the doctor. "She showed me things, Walt." His voice climbed. "Notes, dates, pages of it. She's been keeping track since spring." I asked him if she showed him a bank statement. Cal looked at the plate on the hood. 40 years I've watched my brother lose an argument. He always looks at something else. I told him I wasn't asking him to take my side. I said, "Cal, I'm asking you to read one piece of paper before you sign the next one. One page with a bank's name at the top." He said his eyes were bad in that light. I said it wasn't a light problem. He picked the plate back up, then stood there holding it like a man who'd forgotten what he came out for. "When?" he said finally. "Tuesday, 10 o'clock, Third Fork Savings on Main." He didn't say yes. He got in his truck and started it. But he didn't say no either, and I drove home doing arithmetic on that. Monday, I asked Dr. Vance's office for my records. She came out herself and took me into her office instead of an exam room. The sailboat picture hung behind her right where it's always been. She printed everything. March 11th, transient ischemic attack, resolved, no lasting deficit. June 3rd, cognitive screening, 27 of 30. Her note in the margin, no indication of dementia, reassess annually. Then a second stack. My whole appointment history, 2 years of it, every date, arrival time, procedure, facility. July 19th, Riverside Hospital, Columbus, catheterization lab, check-in, 1:12 p.m., discharge, 4:40 p.m. I asked her one thing before I left. Had anybody ever requested these records? A lawyer? A court? Anybody? She turned to her computer and checked. "No one," she said. "Not once. No records request, no phone call." I asked whether that was strange, given what was coming in December. She took her glasses off. Mr. Acklin, in this state, a guardianship petition normally requires an expert evaluation. A physician has to actually examine the person and file an assessment. She set the glasses down. Nobody has examined you. I'm your physician, and nobody has called this office. I said I didn't know what that meant. It means whoever filed is relying entirely on family testimony. She slid the stack across the desk. And whatever else is going on here, you are not the one who's confused. I drove home with 200 pages on the passenger seat. At Ruth's table, I set the medical stack beside the coffee can and squared the edges up. Statements on the left, records on the right, calendar in the middle. 2 piles of paper and 8 days to Tuesday. She came Thursday afternoon without calling. Didn't knock either. She has a key. Why is the bank calling me about a meeting? No apron voice, no head tilt, coat still on. I said because I asked them to. She stood in my kitchen, and I watched her cycle through 3 different women in about 5 minutes. First, the sad one. Dad, I know it's been hard since Mom. I know you're scared. Eyes wet right on time. I said I wasn't scared. Then the wounded one. Do you have any idea what I do for you? Everything. And you go behind my back to a stranger at a bank? Her voice cracked on stranger. I said Marlene Hoyt watched me sign that form, and she isn't a stranger. Then the last one, quieter, almost kind. Dad? She stepped closer. Are you sure you understand what you're doing? Because a meeting like that goes in a file. And in 6 weeks, somebody's going to read that file. There it was, December sitting on my kitchen counter without a name on it. I said, Tuesday, 10 a.m. She stared at me. What are you bringing? That's the question. That's the only question she came to ask, and it took her 20 minutes to get to it. I said, just myself. That's the one lie I told in this whole business, and I've made my peace with it. She picked up her purse. At the door, she turned around. Dad, you're going to embarrass yourself in front of strangers. Then she was gone, and her car door shut hard out on Rockwell. She was half right. Somebody was going to be embarrassed in front of strangers. Monday night, I set it all out on Ruth's table. 3 stacks, bank statements, medical records, appointment history, calendar squared beside them, rubber band around each one. I checked the order twice, the way you check a panel before you close it up. At 9, Josie texted, Grandpa, are you okay? Mom is crying. I looked at that a long time. I typed, I'm all right, sweetheart, do your homework. Then I sat back in the dark kitchen. Here's what I thought about, not the 60,000. I thought about 1993. Dana was 7. I used to take her on Saturday jobs, and she'd sit in the passenger seat sorting screws into a muffin tin. She was so serious about it. She'd hold one up and say, this one's bent, Daddy, and drop it in the reject cup. 4 hours some Saturdays, because her father needed screws sorted. That girl is in there somewhere. She has to be. And I understood sitting there that tomorrow I was going to do something to her in front of witnesses. So I got a legal pad and wrote down how far I would go. Far enough to stop it, not far enough to end her. No police, no fraud charge, no calling her employer, no telling the cousins, nothing filed by me against her. Josie was not going to lose her mother because her grandfather wanted to be right. 4 items, I numbered them, read them out loud twice to an empty kitchen, then I laid the pad on top of the stacks and went to bed. I wasn't going to take her house. I was going to take back my name. I wore the blue shirt Ruth bought me in 2011. Collar's gone soft at the points. She said it made me look like a man who owned the company. I put the 3 stacks in the Folgers can, pressed the lid down, and set it on the passenger seat with the belt across it. That sounds like a joke. It isn't. I didn't want it sliding. Got there 20 minutes early, sat in the lot, and watched the flag on the pole go from limp to stiff. Marlene Hoyt came out to the lobby at 5 of 10 and shook my hand. Mr. Acklin! She looked at the coffee can. She said nothing about it. I appreciated that more than I could tell her. At 10, Dana came through the doors, Ryan with her, in a sport coat I'd never seen, and behind them a third man. 40-something, charcoal suit, leather briefcase with brass corners, shoes that don't get bought in this county. The lawyer. From Columbus. She had brought counsel to a bank meeting about her own father? And out through the front glass in the lot, my brother Cal stood beside his truck with his hands in his coat pockets looking at the doors. Not walking in, not leaving, just standing there in the cold, deciding. Marlene led us back to the conference room. Glass on 3 sides looking out over the whole lobby. We sat down. The lawyer set his briefcase on the table, brass corners up. I set the coffee can beside it. Dana looked at that dented Folgers can and then at me, and she smiled. It was a real smile. Pity in it and some relief. It was the last time she smiled that day. The conference room at Third Fork has a table for 6 and a projector nobody's plugged in since the Obama administration. 3 glass walls. You can see the whole lobby from that table, and the whole lobby can see you. 2 tellers working, an old woman at the counter with a coin bag, a young man filling out a deposit slip at the standing desk. Marlene sat at the head and opened a folder. Mr. Ackland requested this meeting in his capacity as primary account holder. Ms. Ackland Boyd is present as co-owner. Sir, she said to the man in the charcoal suit, may I have your name for my notes? He gave it. He gave the firm's name too, which was 3 names long. Then he leaned forward before anyone else could speak. I'd like to state at the outset that my client has significant concerns about Mr. Ackland's capacity. There's an active probate matter. I'd suggest anything said here be understood in that light. Marlene wrote for a moment, then she looked up. Noted. This meeting is about account activity. Dana turned toward her, angling her shoulder so I was slightly behind it. Small thing. She's good at small things. Marlene, can I call you Marlene? He gets these ideas. He's been fixated on the balance since summer. I've explained it 4 separate times. The lawyer nodded along. Marlene set her pen down. Ma'am, she waited until Dana looked at her. Your father is sitting right there. You can speak to him. Nobody said anything for a second. Out in the lobby, the coin machine started up that grinding rattle. Ryan shifted in his chair. I reached over and took the lid off the coffee can. I took out the July statement and laid it on the table. Then I slid it not toward my daughter, toward Marlene. Ma'am, would you read the date and time of the $12,000 transfer? The lawyer said. I don't think this is... Marlene picked up the page. July 19th, 2:14 p.m., originating branch Columbus Road. I said thank you. Then I took the second page out of the can and slid that across too. This one's from my cardiologist's office. Would you read the July 19th entry? She read it. Riverside Hospital, Columbus, catheterization lab, check-in 1:12 p.m., discharge 4:40 p.m. Then she stopped. She read it again to herself. I watched her eyes go from the medical page to the statement and back. Nobody in that room breathed. Ryan's chair creaked. The lawyer had gone very still, with his pen an inch off his legal pad. Dana was looking at the 2 pages side by side on the table, looking at them finally. First time in 5 months my daughter had actually looked at a bank statement in front of me. Her face had stopped doing anything at all. Marlene said quietly, Mr. Ackland, these are 91 miles apart. I said, yes, ma'am. 91 miles and I was on a table with a catheter in my leg. Then I said the thing I'd practiced in my kitchen maybe 40 times. I'm not saying who did it. I'm saying it wasn't me, and I'd like the record to reflect that. Marlene wrote for a long moment. Out in the lobby, the old woman finished at the counter and put her coat on. I reached into the can and took out 4 more pairs. I laid them down in pairs, a statement and a medical record, a statement and a medical record, 4 times. June 9th, 8011 40 a.m. stress test, Dr. Vance's office 11 to 12:30. All second, 6500, 3:05 p.m. Echocardiogram, Riverside checked in 2:20. August 9th, September 4th, $28,589. Moved out of that account while I was under a machine on a table or in a waiting room 40 to 90 miles away. The lawyer stood up. I'd like a moment with my client, Marlene said. Sir, this isn't a deposition. Mr. Ackland has the floor and he's the primary account holder. He sat back down. He did not write anything else on his pad. Ryan cracked first. He shoved his chair back and threw a hand at the table. It's a joint account, Walt. Are you kidding me with this? She didn't steal anything legally. That's her money. You signed it over yourself. His voice was loud enough that both tellers turned around. I let it sit for a second, then I said, "I know." He blinked at me. "I know it's legal, Ryan. That's why I'm not talking to the police. I'm talking to you." He opened his mouth and closed it. "You're right," I said. "It was legal. It just wasn't true." Dana had her hands flat on the table on either side of the July pages like a woman steadying herself on ice. Marlene said, "Ma'am, do you dispute any of these transactions?" Dana didn't answer, and I put my hand back in the coffee can and took out the third stack. I set the medical file in the middle of the table where everyone could reach it. March 11th, transient ischemic attack. Resolved, no lasting deficit. June 3rd, cognitive screening. 27 out of 30. Doctor's note says no indication of dementia. Then I turned to the man in the charcoal suit and asked him the question I'd been carrying since Dr. Vance's office. "Sir, before your office filed in September, did anybody request my medical records?" He didn't answer. "Did anybody call my physician, order an evaluation, have a doctor examine me one time?" He looked at Dana. Everyone in that room saw him look at Dana. He said, "My client provided the supporting documentation." I said the supporting documentation was her own notes about her own father and asked if he'd verified any of it with anyone holding a license. He said he'd need to review the file. Marlene put her pen down flat on the table. "There's a guardianship filing," she looked at Dana, "against this account holder." Nobody answered her either. Marlene stood up, opened the glass door, and asked someone in the lobby to send Denise in. She sat back down and spoke to me directly. "Mr. Acklin, Denise handles our elder financial abuse protocol. I'd like to document this properly. Is that all right with you?" I said it was, and through the glass, past Marlene's shoulder, I saw my brother. Cal was standing in the middle of the lobby in his coat, with his hat in his hands. He'd come in at some point, I don't know when, long enough to have watched most of it through the wall. He was looking right at me. Then Dana made a sound I hadn't heard since her mother's funeral. She cried. I've watched my daughter cry on purpose maybe 50 times since she was 4. I know exactly what that looks like. This wasn't it. This was ugly. Both hands over her face, shoulders going, no sound for the first few seconds. "It's 41,000, she said into her hands. The lawyer said her name. She kept going. 41 on the cards. The coffee shop note is 30 more and it's personally guaranteed, and Ryan got laid off in February and I didn't tell you, Dad. I didn't tell anybody." Ryan said, "Dana. They were going to take the house. Josie's junior year." She wiped her face with the back of her wrist, the way she did at 9. "I was going to put it back. All of it. It's going to be mine anyway." And there it was. The whole thing in one sentence. I said, "It was going to be yours." She looked up. "That's not the same as it being yours now." She didn't argue. That's when I knew she'd heard me. She didn't argue. I asked her whose idea December was. Long pause. Ryan was looking at the wall. "His," she said. "Dana," he said again, quieter. "He found the attorney. He filled out the intake." She wasn't crying anymore. She sounded exhausted. "I signed it." I said she signed it. "I signed it." Marlene wrote that down. And then I said the thing I'd driven 11 miles that morning to say, and I said it in a level voice because I'd promised Ruth's kitchen table I would. "Dana, I never once said you were a thief, but you looked at me in front of my family and told me my own mind was gone." She flinched. That's the part I can't put back. I took the legal pad out of the can and unfolded it. "I've got 4 things. You can say no to all 4. I'd like you to hear them first." Marlene got her pen ready. 1. The petition is withdrawn, not continued, not held. Withdrawn with a stamped copy in my hand inside 7 days. The lawyer said that could be done by Friday. 2. The account is separated today in this room. Sole ownership mine. No co-owner, no authorized user. Marlene said she could process that before we stood up. 3. $60,000 comes back. $500 a month, written down, notarized, starting January 1st. No interest. If a month's tight, you tell me before the 1st, not after. Dana looked up. 10 years. I said 10 years. 4, and this was the one I'd rewritten 4 times. Nobody in this family discusses my mind when I'm not in the room. Not to Cal, not to the cousins, not to Josie. If anyone has a concern about my head, they say it to my face or they take me to Dr. Vance. Those are the two doors, Ryan said. And if we don't, I said, then Denise files the elder financial abuse report. She's already got half written, and I sign it and I let the state decide what a case looks like. I said, I'd rather not. I said it once and I didn't say it twice. Dana said, okay. Just that. Okay. Marlene printed the separation forms right there. Took 11 minutes. I signed with her pen, same as in April. Same lobby, same low ceiling. The lawyer put his pad in his briefcase and snapped the brass corners shut. Nobody in that room had raised a voice except Ryan. Cal was waiting by my truck. He'd been out there 20 minutes in a coat that isn't warm enough, and his ears were red. I put the coffee can on the hood between us. He said, I heard most of it, through the glass. I said I saw him. He looked at that dented Folgers can for a long moment. I signed a paper about my own brother. He said it slowly, like he was reading it off the hood. About your mind. And I never asked to see one bank statement, not one. She showed me her own notebook and I signed. I said, that's right. Walt, I said, don't, not out here in a parking lot. I said, it'll keep. He nodded. Then he said, how do I take it back? I told him to call the clerk in the morning and ask about withdrawing an affidavit and to bring his ID. He called that afternoon, drove down himself, 68 years old, with his hat on, and pulled it before 5 o'clock. Told me the young man behind the glass was very polite about it. We sat in his truck a while first, though. Right there in the bank lot with the engine running and the heater rattling, 10 minutes and neither of us said one word. That's how my father's family does it. You sit in a vehicle with a man until something's settled. Then Cal put it in reverse and said, Sunday, my house. I said, all right. And Walt, he didn't look over, you sit wherever you want to sit. I said I'd take the end by the window. He said the end by the window was fine. The withdrawal came Friday like the lawyer said, stamped copy, petition withdrawn by petitioner, case closed. I read it in the truck outside the courthouse and I'll admit my hands weren't steady. I put it in the coffee can when I got home, right on top. 3 weeks after that, Dana called. Not a text, she called, and she waited through 4 rings without hanging up, which she never does. Ryan had moved out. He was at his mother's in Zanesville. She said it flat, no crying, like a woman reading a weather report. I asked about the house. We're selling it, there's some equity, it'll cover the cards. I said that was probably the right thing, then a long pause on the line. Dad, Josie asks about you every day. I said she could come whenever she wants. Could I bring her? And here's where I had to be careful, because everything in me wanted to say, yes, come on over, let's put it all behind us. That's the crack every man my age falls into. You're so tired of being right. So I said what I'd worked out in my head weeks before. She can come any time, on her own or with you, but it's here, at my house, not at yours. Silence. Because of the account, I said no, because at my table I'm the one who does the talking about me. She was quiet a second, then she said okay. They came the following Sunday. Dana sat in the chair that used to be nobody's, and Josie sat in Ruth's, and it was awkward as a first date. But nobody cut my food. January 2nd, $500 posted to my account. There was a message with it, 4 paragraphs. I read it twice, and I won't repeat it here because it was hers. And some of it was true, and some of it was still her working an angle. And I've stopped needing to sort out which was which. I wrote back, received, thank you, February. Nothing came on the 1st, nothing on the 2nd. On the 3rd, she texted, Dad, can we talk about the amount? Things are really tight with the move. I sat with my phone at that table for maybe 10 minutes, because I could hear all of it. The move, the mattress on the floor at her mother-in-law's, Josie changing schools mid-year, every bit of it real. And I could hear Ruth too. Ruth would have said, Walt, she's your daughter, it's only money. Ruth would have been wrong about this one. It was never only money. I typed one line. The amount is in the agreement. We can talk about anything else anytime. Then I put the phone down and washed 2 cups. The payment came the next morning. Every 1st of the month since. Sometimes on the 1st, sometimes the 2nd. And on the 1st Saturday of every month, I still drive 4 miles to Third Fork Savings, walk to the ATM, and print my statement on that cheap serrated paper. Marlene sees me through the window sometimes and lifts a hand. She calls me Mr. Acklin. I've told her twice she can call me Walt. She won't. She says it's not the way they do it. I like her fine. I turned 72 in June. In April, I did the thing I should have done 2 years ago, and I did it properly. I found a lawyer in the next county over, a woman with no connection to anybody in my family. And I had a power of attorney drawn, real one, durable. Cal's the agent. It doesn't take effect unless 2 physicians say it should, and it gets reviewed every year on my birthday, whether anybody wants to or not. Cal cried a little in that office. He's gotten leaky in his old age. The paperwork cost me $600, and it is the best $600 I've spent since the ring. Josie comes Wednesdays now. She's got her license, drives a Corolla with a dent she won't explain. I showed her how to read a bank statement, whole thing, top to bottom. Posting date versus transaction date, where the branch code lives, how to spot a transfer versus a withdrawal. She said, "Grandpa, nobody my age is going to use paper." I said, "Fine, use the phone. But once a year, print one out and hold it in your hand so you know what the real thing looks like." She said, "That was actually kind of smart," in the voice a 17-year-old uses when she's surprised. Sundays we go to Cal's. I sit at the end by the window. Dana comes most weeks. She sits 2 chairs down. We talk about the weather mostly, her job, the Corolla, whether it'll frost. It isn't healed. I want to be honest with you about that because I don't think we do each other any favors pretending. It isn't healed. But it's real, which is more than it was. People ask me about the money. The money was never the thing. I want to be clear about that. Because I think if you've lived long enough, you already know it. Here's the thing. 4 days. From the Thursday I stood dripping in her kitchen to the Monday I opened that can, 4 days I lived inside my daughter's version of me. 4 days where I woke up at 3 in the morning and lay there, running an inventory of my own head. Did I take it? Did I move it and forget? Did I sign something? Is this what it feels like when it starts? Does it feel exactly like being fine? I have never been that frightened. Not in Ruth's hospital room, not on that catheter table, because a man can lose money, a man can lose his wife, and God knows I found out. You survive it. But when somebody you love tells the room that your mind is gone and the room believes her, you start to lose the one thing you use to check everything else. That's what she took. Not the 60,000. The 60,000's coming back at 500 a month. And here's what I'd tell you if you're anywhere near 65 and somebody in your family has started being very kind to you very suddenly. Write it down. Not because you'll forget. Write it down because somebody may one day tell you that you did, and the only friend you'll have in that room is a piece of paper with a date on it. I still love my daughter. I want to say that plainly. Loving her and holding the line turned out to be the same job. I just didn't know that until I was 71. First Saturday of the month. Third Fork Savings a little after 8. The lot's empty except for a truck and a dented Corolla. Josie drove me because she wanted to practice on the highway, and I let her think that's why. I walked over to the ATM, put the card in. Same 4 numbers I've used since 1994. The machine hummed and thought about it. Then it printed 1 page. 1 page. That's all it takes now. I folded it in half and put it in my shirt pocket behind the pencil and walked back across the lot with the wind coming off the fields the way it does out here in the fall. Josie had the heat going. She pulled out onto Main and got up to speed, and then she said without looking over, "Grandpa, do you still keep those in the coffee can?" I said every one of them. She laughed. "That's so weird." I said it is. I said keep it in mind anyway. She turned onto the county road and we drove past the town hall I wired in 1987. 3 stories panel B on the 2nd floor. And I didn't say anything about it because she's heard it. My daughter told a room full of people that I was confused. She was half right. I was confused about exactly one thing, and I've been confused about it for a long while. I thought loving somebody meant letting them tell me who I was. I don't think that anymore. I've got a coffee can, a pencil, a calendar from Corbin Building Supply, and a seat at the end of the table by the window. I know exactly who I am. So let me ask you one thing before I go and pick one. If you'd been sitting in that glass room, would you have laid the statements down like I did and given her the chance to sit there while it happened? Or would you have walked straight into that courthouse and let a judge sort her out? Tell me in the comments. I still wonder some nights. If this one meant something to you, hit like and subscribe so the next one finds you. And there's another story down in the description. A wedding, a will, and a woman who kept every letter. I think you'll want that one next.